The Astra ballroom shimmered under a ceiling of crystal fire, the kind of light meant for kings, or men who still believed they were. Just past 7 in downtown San Francisco, the city's elite crowded the marble floor, waiting for the mysterious investor who had supposedly saved Sterling Dynamics from collapse. Richard Sterling stood at the center of it all, gripping a champagne flute like it was proof he hadn't already lost everything. Then the doors opened. A hush rippled through the room as Isabella Sterling stepped inside. Her emerald suit carrying the quiet authority of someone who had stopped playing by the old rules. Richard's knuckles whitened around the glass. "What are you doing here?" he muttered, too stunned to hide the fear in his voice. Isabella didn't break her stride. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a problem she's already solved. "I'm here," she said evenly, "because this company deserves the truth." A single shocked breath swept through the room. Even Amber froze, the ruby on her throat trembling. And before anyone understood what was happening, the balance of power had already shifted. Permanently. If this opening pulls you in, hit like and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales for more gripping stories. The silence inside the Astra ballroom tightened as Isabella climbed the few steps to the stage. No spotlight followed her, yet every pair of eyes did, drawn by something deeper than curiosity, an instinct that whatever was about to unfold would change the night entirely. The golden light from the chandeliers caught the edge of her emerald sleeve as she reached the top, but her gaze never left Richard Sterling, who stood rigid beside his mistress, Amber Hayes. His smile had collapsed into something brittle, the shape of a man suddenly aware that the ground beneath him was not stone but thin ice. "Isabella," Richard said again, this time louder, forcing a laugh meant to reassure the room. "This, whatever you think you're doing, it isn't the time or the place." A murmur went through the guests. Some shifted uncomfortably, some leaned in. Amber clutched Richard's arm, whispering through her perfect teeth. "Why is she even here? You said she wouldn't show." Isabella heard it. Everyone did. Her fingers brushed the microphone, steady and controlled. "Richard," she said softly, "I didn't come here to interrupt your evening. I came because the truth deserves a witness." The sentence washed over the room like a cold current. Richard stepped forward, desperate to reclaim authority. "The truth. Isabella, please. You left. You walked out. You wanted space." "Space to think," she replied. "Space to save the company you nearly destroyed." A gasp cracked through the ballroom. Even the servers carrying champagne froze mid-stride. Then the doors swung open again. 2 men in dark suits entered. Men the board recognized. Men no one expected here tonight. Attorneys. The kind hired when something is already burning and there's no time left to negotiate. They positioned themselves at the base of the stage like shadows that had grown bones. Richard's facade fractured. You brought lawyers." His voice stumbled. "For what?" "For clarity," Isabella said. She motioned to David Chen, the CFO, who had been standing near the bar, pale under the warm lights. He took the stage slowly, as if each step required permission from his shaking legs. Sarah Jenkins, the CEO, followed with a sternness that suggested she had seen this coming far longer than she would ever admit. The room held its breath. David's voice trembled. As of 4:58 this afternoon, Vidian Capital finalized its acquisition of the Sterling Dynamics debt package. Richard blinked, uncomprehending. "What debt package?" "The one you created," Sarah answered sharply, her words slicing clean through the tension. "The one tied to the reckless expansion you hid from the board." Richard looked from face to face, hunting for an ally and finding none. "You think you can embarrass me? You think you can walk in here and pretend you're the hero?" Isabella exhaled once. Not tired, resolved. "I didn't walk in to be the hero, Richard. I walked in because you forced my hand. Because you gambled with our employees' futures. Because you believed no one could stop you." Her tone never rose, yet each word carried weight like falling marble. Amber whispered urgently into Richard's side. "Say something. Don't just stand there." But Richard felt it. A shift. the power draining from him like water slipping through broken glass. He snarled, "You don't own Vidian. You don't have that kind of money." For the first time, Isabella smiled, not triumphantly, not cruelly, but with the kind of certainty that growth rings a bell inside a room. "Vidian Capital," she said, turning to the crowd, "was founded by my mother, and I have been its sole proprietor for 20 years. The shock rolled through the ballroom in waves. Richard lunged toward the microphone, grasping for control. "You're lying. She's lying. She doesn't have the authority." A hand blocked him. One of the attorneys. Unyielding. "Touch the microphone again, Mr. Sterling," the attorney said, his voice low but carrying, "and you will be removed from this meeting." Richard stepped back, breathing hard, sweat building under the collar of his designer tux. Amber shifted away from him as if stepping aside might spare her from whatever was coming. Isabella continued, her voice smooth as polished steel. "Richard leveraged everything. Company stock, pension funds, executive accounts, all for a vanity acquisition he hid from the board. He siphoned money into shell corporations. He used corporate funds to support his extracurricular activities." Amber stiffened. The audience stared, some in disbelief, some in fury, many in silent vindication. "And," Isabella added, "he traded his own shares to cover the losses." Richard's jaw dropped. "That's not. You said it was temporary. You said." "I said nothing," Isabella replied. "You signed everything. And tonight, every signature becomes reality." "Hush." Complete, suffocating. David stepped forward with a manila folder, his voice cracking. "Mr. Sterling, you no longer hold voting shares. Vidian Capital now owns 51% of the company." The chandeliers hummed softly above them, unable to drown out Richard's unraveling. "You're firing me," he demanded, voice shrill. "At my own gala. Over rumors. Over jealousy." "This isn't jealousy," Sarah snapped. "This is accountability." Amber tugged Richard's sleeve with growing panic. "Tell them she's lying. Tell them the board supports you." But the board did not look at him. They looked at Isabella, the woman who had built the algorithms, written the bylaws, and saved their jobs without ever demanding credit. And Richard Sterling finally understood. Credit was the only currency he ever valued, and he had spent it all. He lunged toward Isabella with a desperation stripped of dignity. "You can't do this. I made this company what it is." "No," she answered quietly. "You made it what it almost became. I'm making it what it should have been." The attorneys placed documents on the podium. A resignation. A non-disclosure agreement. A waiver of all claims. "Sign," the attorney said, "or we proceed with criminal charges." Amber's composure cracked completely. "Criminal? Richard, what is he talking about?" Richard swallowed, throat bone dry. He looked at the documents, and for the first time in years he felt small, powerless. "Suppose." Isabella watched him, not with triumph, but with a solemn clarity that revealed exactly how much this moment cost her. "I gave you years," she said quietly. "Tonight, I'm giving you an exit." For a heartbeat, he considered fighting, shouting, forcing the room back under his control. But when he met the eyes of his employees, people he had dismissed, ignored, and disrespected, he found no loyalty there, no sympathy, only exhaustion and relief. Hands shaking, he picked up the pen. Amber grabbed his wrist. "Don't sign that. You promised me a future." He shook her off, and he signed. Final stroke, jagged and unsteady. The room exhaled, slow, collective, astonished. He looked up at Isabella, but she didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, as if acknowledging a chapter finally closing. Security approached. "Mr. Sterling," one said gently, "we'll escort you out." Amber tried to push past them. "I'm not leaving. I deserve something." But Isabella turned toward her, expression unreadable. "You'll leave with exactly what you brought into this company." Security guided Amber toward the doors despite her protests. Richard followed, stumbling. His shoulders no longer squared but slumped beneath the weight of his own choices. The ballroom watched in complete silence. Richard paused at the exit, turning back with eyes burning, not with defiance, but with the haunting knowledge that he had destroyed himself. And as the doors shut behind him, the sound echoed like the closing of a vault. Inside, the applause began. Not because of cruelty, not because of spectacle, but because justice, for once, had arrived in the room wearing an emerald suit. Employees rose to their feet. Engineers embraced one another. Some cried. Some laughed with a relief so sharp it trembled through their ribs. Sarah reached Isabella first. "You saved them," she whispered. "All 800. Isabella shook her head gently. "We saved the company. Now we build it again." Outside, Richard waited on the curb for a car that never came. His accounts frozen, his titles stripped, his reputation fractured beyond repair. Amber stood several feet away, mascara running, cursing him for losing everything she never earned. A delivery van nearly splashed them both as it passed. For the first time in years, Richard Sterling had no driver, no home, no empire. Only consequences. Back inside the ballroom, Isabella stood beneath the chandelier's warm glow as her employees surrounded her with gratitude that felt like sunlight after a long winter. But even as she accepted their thanks, she glanced toward the doors, toward the place where Richard had disappeared into the night. And her voice, steady and clear, carried across the room. "This is only the beginning." In the days that followed, the noise around the gala faded, but something far more lasting settled over Isabella's life. For the first time in years, she could walk into her office without bracing for another storm someone else had created. The company she rebuilt was quieter now, steadier, no longer driven by ego but by purpose. And though her team looked to her with a new kind of trust, she carried herself the same way she had on that stage. Calm, deliberate, certain of the work ahead. She didn't celebrate Richard's fall. That part belonged to the choices he refused to face. What mattered to her was the shift she felt when she stepped into the lab and saw her engineers already deep into their next breakthrough. Hope had returned to the building, not because the chaos ended, but because truth finally had room to breathe. One evening, long after the hallways emptied, Isabella stopped at the window overlooking the city. The lights shimmered below, restless, alive, yet she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: stillness. She understood now that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet decision to rise again and again, until the world could no longer ignore what you built. And somewhere far from that view, Richard walked a very different road, one shaped by the consequences he once believed he could outrun. If this story moved you, please like, share, and help Canada's Heartfelt Tales grow by subscribing for more powerful stories.